Hello, my name is Dan Skipbound, and this is From the Fourth Row, my channel. And this is a special six-part series that I'm doing called Bleacher Features. And I'm doing 6 sports movies with 6 different guests. And this evening I got Jeremy Paul Adams, and we're going to be talking about the baseball classic Field of Dreams. What do you think about that, Jeremy?
Well, I think if you were going to pick one sports movie that you would ask me to talk about, I really can't think of one that is a better choice for me personally than Field of Dreams. Something Dan probably is frustrated to know about me is that I'm not the biggest sports guy in the world, but I did grow up going to games with my dad and stuff, and always kind of any appreciation I had of sports was through my dad and him loving baseball and loving basketball. So Field of Dreams is that one movie. Though I love a lot of sports movies, it's the one movie that really hits that nerve of it's not just about a particular game or a sport, but it's about fathers and sons and relationships and all of these deeper things. I think even more so than other sports films. So I'm really excited to talk about it and maybe get a little emotional, reliving a little bit of what this movie does to me every time I watch it.
Actually, I did know that you weren't a sports fan, but you did love sports movies, and I did know that you loved Field of Dreams, and that's why I asked you
Yes.
to do this particular episode, because I knew how much you cared about this movie. And obviously, the whole thing with fathers and sons, I know that is a big thing with you. And so I definitely knew how to get you to do one of these, and this is the one I knew. So I think I knew enough about you to know this is the one I'm going to
I know,
offer.
like I said you know that I'm not a big sports guy, but I like sports movies, so you know that much.
Yeah.
If it wasn't going to be Rocky, then it could be Field of Dreams. Those are my two faves.
Oh, Rocky's another great one. So the cast of Field of Dreams is a phenomenal cast. We have Kevin Costner playing Ray Kinsella, Ray Liotta as Shoeless Joe Jackson, Timothy Busfield as Mark, Amy Madigan as Annie Kinsella, James Earl Jones as Terrence Mann, Burt Lancaster as Dr. Archibald Moonlight Graham, Frank Whaley as Archie Graham, which is the younger version of Moonlight Graham, Gabby Hoffman, very young at the time, as Karen Kinsella. What do you think about that cast, Jeremy?
It's a great cast. I know you're probably going to get into the origins of the movie, but Kevin Costner just played a character named Ray Kinsella, and Kinsella is the name of the person that wrote the original. I think it was a poem that this is based on. So yeah, there's a little bit of autobiography in his character, and I just think for what the movie is, there's no better actor than Kevin Costner for this role. Particularly at this time in his career, he's just beginning to be known for playing ball players in movies after Bull Durham, and yeah, this one, he's not a ball player, but he's somebody who's entrenched in the game, and it means a lot to him in his life. And it's just I can't think of a better actor. And yeah, I always loved Amy Madigan. I always loved her. She was in a lot of great '80s movies, Places in the Heart, and a lot of other films. And yeah, she's terrific. I mean, it could have been just a forgettable wife role, but she really brings a humor and a passion to that role. You mentioned, of course, Ray Liotta, who shows up as a bit of a surprise as Shoeless Joe Jackson at a certain point in the movie. And this was when he was just really coming on the scene. He was really fantastic in a movie called Something Wild, which is one of my favorite '80s movies by Jonathan Demme. And then just 1 year after this would be Goodfellas. So this is really Ray Liotta at the prime. And then the one actor that you didn't mention on that little list there, just we got to give a little shout out to, is an actor named Dwyer Brown, who does play Ray's father at the end of the film, just one of those actors you haven't seen in that much else, but he just comes in for this one scene in this movie and just really, really nails it with Kevin Costner. So I had to give him a little love. But yeah. And then, of course, the big guns are James Earl Jones and Burt Lancaster. I mean, they're both so incredible in this movie and bring a lot of gravitas and history and validity to it. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, and the thing is, Kevin Costner's agent discouraged him from taking this movie. He says, "You just did a baseball movie. Why do you want to do another baseball movie?" Kevin Costner was adamant. I want this movie. And it wasn't one of these movies that was easy to get made either. Once the guys had the rights to it, the director and the producers had the rights to it, and they were going to make it. It wasn't always a cut and dry thing, and Kevin Costner wasn't always going to be. But once they got him on board, everything fell into place because he just loved the story, you know. And so we have the directors Phil Alden Robinson. If you might know this guy. This guy is an actor. He's done some things as an actor, but he's most famous for directing this film.
It was his first film, if I'm not mistaken. And then, he went on to make some good ones later. I think his two most notable movies after this were Sneakers, which is the kind of the computer-themed heist movie with Robert Redford and Ben Kingsley, really fun movie. And then a movie I think is a little bit underrated is The Sum of All Fears, which is the John Clancy movie with Ben Affleck, which I think was a good Jack Ryan movie. And so Phil Alden Robinson's guy's got some chops, and what a way to come on the scene with this movie.
And something that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned is the score by James Horner. What a phenomenal score!
Great,
for this film.
Yeah, Horner, and a few composers in this time could bring the emotion like James Horner did, and this is one of his signature scores for sure.
Yeah. All right, so there isn't kind of like an origin story type of thing where Ray Kinsella narrates the story of his life and his parents and stuff. If you would like to say anything about that, feel free to say anything, but I did not start my notes with that.
I just think it's interesting that it really starts in this opening about this guy talking about his life and growing up and going to college and all of this stuff. And of course, he does hit on his father and how his father loved baseball. It's one thing they shared. But this opening almost preps you for a different movie because it's all about this small town guy and his life. And it's like, is this sort of a Frank Capra small town, guy movie? Or, they talk a little bit about baseball, but it doesn't really fully show that this is just a baseball movie. So I think that's really intentional because it's setting in your mind, once you do get into the stuff going on in the movie and when baseball comes big into it, in the back of your mind, it's already set that really it started off talking about family and about life in a small town and about relationships. And it sets up, the rift between him and his dad and the fact that his dad passed away many years ago. So it kind of sets all these little seeds in the back of your mind so that as you go through this story of the baseball, you kind of, when it comes back to this stuff and this turns out to be the really key stuff, it really clicks. And I think that was really smart in terms of the screenplay and setting things up.
Absolutely. It gets a lot of information out there, but doesn't take a lot of time to give you that information. So then you can kind of get into the movie. And that's what we're going to do right now. Kevin Costner's walking through some corn, and all of a sudden he hears a voice. If you build it, he will come. Ray hears a voice in the corn, asks his family members, but they can't hear the voice at all. He goes to the hardware store, and the people at the hardware says they can't believe what he's talking about. Like, what do you mean you're hearing voices?
Yeah.
So it's
such when I was in film school, they always talked about you got to find a hook at the beginning of your story. You got to find something to hook people, get people pulled into the story. And what is better than this opening? It's just this normal guy is out and he hears this voice, talks to him, and you're already intrigued. Like, what is going on? Is he crazy? Is there something fantastical going on? And what a way to really hook the audience. It's really terrific.
And so he's mad, and he's saying to him, he's talking to himself. He said, "Who are you?" And the voice and he talks to his wife. He tells his wife, if he builds the baseball field in the corn, Shoeless Joe Jackson will come play baseball again.
Yeah, because he has a vision. He looks out and he sees it like later that night, and then he sees Shoeless Joe Jackson. So he's like getting little pieces that he's kind of putting together with everything.
All right. So then Ray says he's never done anything on the spot in his life. His wife says, you need to do it if that's what you want to do.
Which is amazing, because it's like you would think any wife would be like, this guy's crazy. You know, what's going on with my husband? But she's just the kind of person that embraces life and just if this is something he wants to do, she supports it. And I seeing this movie as a kid, I think that was a really cool family relationship the husband and wife had in a movie that was really cool to see and kind of meant a lot to me.
Then he tells the story about Ray tells the story to his daughter about Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, setting the stage both for the people watching. They may not be, on the baseball history, but also setting up the movie of the Chicago Black Sox scandal and everything. That's
right. That's anybody that doesn't know, Shoeless Joe Jackson played for the White Sox of the teens and early 20s, and in 1919, they threw the World Series 100 years ago this year.
Yeah, this is the anniversary.
And so Ray says, I created something totally illogical. And Annie said, well, it's a pretty baseball field. Which it was.
Real quick aside, maybe my other favorite baseball movie is 8 Men Out, which actually came out, I think, just a year before this one, or maybe it was right in that era.
Right around that time.
It was a film about the Chicago Black Sox scandal. Actor named D.B. Sweeney played Shoeless Joe in that, and it's a really terrific film if anyone hasn't seen it. They actually make kind of a neat double feature, so I just want to give a little shout out to that film as well.
You actually said a mouthful there. They do make a great double feature, because you got the Shoeless Joe Jackson that in 8 Men Out, but then you get this kind of legend of Shoeless Joe Jackson in Field of Dreams. You're like, who is this guy? Well, that's where you got 8 Men Out. So, hold on here. Dang it. Screwed up my notes. I'm right here. Okay. So then he's at dinner. He tells his wife, isn't it, going back what I said about, she said it was a beautiful baseball field. And he says, Ray, isn't it? And then his daughter's calling him, and he's like, in a minute. And then she's like, Daddy. And she's like, Karen, in a minute. And eventually he turns and she says, but there's a man on the lawn. Which is, at the time, it was kind of funny. There's a man on the lawn. Because she didn't
realize it's a baseball field.
Yeah. So Ray looks out, and it's Shoeless Joe Jackson. And he hits him some fly pops. Ray introduces himself to Joe. Joe picks out a bat. Joe's getting thrown out of the baseball. This is a quote from Joe. Getting thrown out of baseball was like having part of myself amputated, which, anybody that's been caught cheating or has done something illegal or whatever can understand what Joe's saying about having part of your body amputated, because he loved the game. And the thing is, he didn't cheat. It was his teammates that cheated.
Yeah, he knew about it, right? But he wasn't like an active participant. He tried to stay out of it as much as he could. But just the fact that he knew and was guilty by association basically.
Yeah, bingo. That's exactly it. So Ray pitches to Joe. Then Ray says, hey, see if you can hit the curveball. And Joe hits it right back. I mean, a line drive right back at Ray. He says, okay, you can hit the curveball. Which is a funny scene. He's like, can I hit? And he like gives him these dagger eyes. What do you mean? Like, can I hit the curveball? Joe says he loves the game. Joe asks about the lights. And he explains to him how all the ballparks in baseball have lights, even Wrigley Field, which at the time, that was kind of because they had just gotten lights at Wrigley Field. Wrigley Field had played day games every day. They all only played day games until that time in the late 80s is when they got lights for the very first time at Wrigley Field. So that was kind of interesting that they threw that in there. Um,
It's like Joe knew what was going on in the real world.
yeah. Ray tells him the owners thought more people could attend night games. Of course, most baseball games now are at night.
Yep.
Joe says owners. Ray introduces. He says that because the owners, he had a love-hate relationship with the owners back when he was a player. So he's like, the owners. So Ray introduces Joe to his wife and daughter. And Joe, another famous line in the movie, Joe says, "Is this heaven?" And Ray says, "No, it's Iowa."
May come up again, that line.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, can I just say, we know somebody from Iowa, and it's kind of like, damn it, man, why does that guy have to be from Iowa? Of all the people we know, one guy from Iowa, and it's like, damn, why does that guy have to be? My friends,
you had it built up in your mind from this movie that Iowa people had to be great
people. Not this guy, but I won't even get into that. I won't get into that.
But it's just great screenwriting always when you set something up like that. You have a scene and maybe a line of dialogue is said, and it's like, oh, that's cool, it kind of works, and then they bring that back later. It's what when I was in film school, they used to call it setups and payoffs. You set something up and then you pay it off later, and it's just one of the really brilliant things in the screenplay, and the way that particular line comes back is just so perfect. We'll get there.
That's a great comeback in the movie. So then Ray starts talking to his wife, and she's like, "Are we keeping Ray to his wife? We're keeping the field, this field, his Annie." And she's like, "You bet we are. You bet your ass we are. We are keeping this field." And so then, of course, what's considered the villain of the movie, but really, I mean, I guess you have to have a villain, but he's not really a villain. He's just doing what people do. He thought he was trying to help Annie out. Mark tries to help Ray and Annie sell the farm. Of course, Ray says no.
He's almost like a Christmas movie villain, like somebody who just doesn't see that is too caught up in material things and in like real life to see the magical things that are going on. He's just that kind of a character more than like a true villain, like you'd see in a Christmas TV special, like dad just doesn't understand it, and then of course at some point in the story that person's finally going to come around and see the magical thing going on. It's it's that kind of traditional story that they go for there.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Then the whole not just Joe. Joe brings out the entire White Sox because he's like, well, I can't play baseball with just myself and you. We need a team out here. So he brings the whole White Sox out there on the field. Then Mark and Annie's parents are there.
Yeah.
They can't see the players on the field behind them. They're like walking around and stuff. They don't know anybody's behind them. They don't know that they're there. And it's a believability factor. I just wanted to throw that in there. And then we hear the voice again. And it says, "Ease his pain." Ease his pain.
To go back real quick to when they come back on the field, you skipped over like one of my favorite lines in the movie when Joe mentions Ty Cobb. I love that part. It's so great.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
Ty Cobb wanted to come play. We told him to stick it.
Yeah, you're right. Nope, I did skip over that part, but you're absolutely right. That was a great one. Ty Cobb, like, no, get lost, Ty Cobb. You're not playing.
If anyone, again, doesn't know baseball history, Ty Cobb was a very famous baseball player back in those days who had a reputation for being a not so good guy who would get people with his cleats. He would like do all kinds of underhanded things and was just not a good dude from all accounts. So
very dirty
funny little joke. Yeah.
Very dirty player. All right, so that line, "ease his pain," leads to the second chapter, if you will, in the movie. Because everybody, if you know anything about movies have three chapters or three parts.
Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, they call it.
And now this leads into Act 2 of the film, which is a perfect way to segue into Act 2. So "ease his pain" is they end up looking at a town. They end up going to a town hall meeting where the people at the town hall meeting want to take these books out of the library. They want to take these books out of the school because of Terrence Mann was let's say he instigated violence and so forth in their minds, the people in the town hall meeting. And he stands up and defends his books.
He wrote like these poems and books of poetry and stuff in the 1960s, and they've been put into schools and stuff, and now they're saying, oh, they promote bad ideas, they promote sex and all this kind of stuff, so that these small town people want to get rid of the books. And I just have to point out, this is a parallel in real life with what was going on with the book Catcher in the Rye, when people had put Catcher in the Rye into schools, and a lot of people are outraged because it had some of that kind of material, and they try to get it taken out. And you'll see there's another parallel with J.D. Salinger being a recluse writer who no one could ever talk to, or he wouldn't give interviews. He just kind of hid away. He never wrote again. So you'll see they're setting the seeds for all of that kind of material with this character that they're building up.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very similar character to Terrence Mann. Ray's in the town hall meeting, and he figures it out. That's who they're talking about. And it's Terrence Mann. That's who he needs to ease the pain, is Terrence Mann.
Because he wrote a poem about baseball that Ray finds, and like the language in the poem connects to everything that's going on. So he thinks that's who he's supposed to ease his pain.
And a little bit of backstory about Terrence Mann. He wanted to play ball, but he couldn't in Ebbets Field. He wanted to play at Ebbets Field. If you know what Ebbets Field is, Ebbets Field is what used to be the home of, I believe, the Dodgers before they moved to California. And then the Mets came in, and then they tore Ebbets Field down, and they had to build the Mets a new stadium. So that's what Ebbets Field is. So let me see here. Annie says you can't go. Okay, Annie. Now this is where it's getting a little dicey for the family here, because Annie's
they don't have any money. They're not bringing any money on the farm. They've got rent on the farm to pay, and everything's kind of going south. And now he wants to take off on this weird trip.
Yeah, to my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts, to go visit Terrence Mann, which is irony of all ironies that I'm a Red Sox fan. And they end up going to Boston. And so Ray says that he tells his wife, Annie, I dreamed of going to Fenway Park. I dreamed of going to Fenway Park with Terrence Mann. I had a dream of it. And so Ray ends up convincing Annie that he can go to Ebbets Field. I meant Fenway Park in Boston to talk to Terrence Mann. A funny scene in the movie. You get is some good laughs out of this. He's like walking around. He's asking people if they know directions to Terrence Mann's apartment, and they're like, "Who the heck are you? Get away from me! Leave me alone!" and all this stuff. It's kind of a funny banter between these people and him. They're like, "Who the heck is this stranger bothering us, trying to find out who Terrence Mann is?"
Are you telling me that's what the people are like in Boston, Dan? They're salty people in the street like that?
Grumpy people.
Is that what it's like?
Yeah.
I'm shocked. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm a representative of a place that's maybe not the nicest people in the country, but I try to do my best.
They're authentic, though. There's nothing bad about it.
So Terrence finally answers the door, and how he answers the door is like this. Who the hell are you? Now, who answers the door? If I came to your house, Jeremy, would you say, who the hell are you? No.
If I was a reclusive writer, I didn't want anybody to come to the house ever, and was, had reporters showing up all the time trying to ask me stupid interview questions, I probably would.
Yeah, you make a very valid point there. And he says, I don't have the answers you're looking for.
Yeah.
And Ray begs him. He says, just for 1 minute, just 1 minute. Can I have 1 minute of your time? And then he starts talking, and then he kicks him out of the apartment. Get out of the apartment.
The part with the supposed gun is so funny. It always made me laugh so much as a kid. He puts his hand in his jacket like it's a gun.
Yeah, he puts a finger in the jacket pocket and says, all right, you're going to Fenway Park. You're coming to Fenway Park with me. And he's like, that's not a gun. Take your hand out of your pocket. That's not a gun. And so they end up going to the Red Sox, an A's game.
Yeah.
That's who the Red Sox are playing. So he tells him the story of the baseball field in Iowa. Terrence says he wants some private. He wants to be left alone. Once they go to the game, it's it. He doesn't want to have anything to do with this anymore.
And again, real quick, just the brilliance of casting James Earl Jones. When I was a kid, I hadn't seen him that much and stuff. I just knew Darth Vader basically in the 80s, but to see him in this role, he's so funny and awesome. And obviously, this is what led me to discover many of the great films he was in. Why am I blanking on the boxing one?
The champ.
It'll come. No, it'll come to me. It's the
Roots.
No. Just keep going. I'll get it. But the title's eluding me. But I did see that one as a teenager, and it's a great film. But yeah, he's so good in this movie. It just really inspired casting.
He's playing this grumpy guy. You don't normally see him play this type of character, except when he's playing a guy that's evil incarnate. That's another whole ball of wax.
Yeah.
So he asks him. He says, "What do you want?" He says, I want a dog and a beer."
Mm-hmm.
He's telling him. He tells him the story of the field, and he says, "Leave me alone," and this and that. And he says, "No, I mean, what do you want? I want a dog and a beer."
The Great White Hope, by the way.
Oh, that's right. The Great White.
Great boxing movie with James Earl Jones. Everyone should see.
That's right. So then, while they're sitting watching the game, we hear another voice, and it says, "Go the distance." And the board out in center field says Moonlight Graham. And
his stats, it gives like his like life stats and stuff up on the board.
Which is really weird.
Yeah, it's a really magical scene. That always kind of like got my imagination that there would be like magical things up on that board. It's kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, that was an interesting way to put that out there in the film, I thought.
Yeah. They were getting creative with how's he going to be getting this information now. It was cool.
Yeah. Ray drops Terrence off at home, but Terrence figures Ray out. He says, "Moonlight Graham." He said, "Go the distance." He heard.
I love Costner's reaction. You saw it.
Yeah. Because he did see it. My dang lights flickering.
You're right.
He heard the message. He goes with Ray to Minnesota to find Moonlight Graham. So he finally convinced him, because when he saw the message and he heard the voice, he knew he had to go to Minnesota with Ray. He knew Ray wasn't full of baloney. He knew what he was talking about, and he had to see this through for himself.
Yeah. He was resisting through that entire baseball game, and then finally, he knew he couldn't resist anymore. I mean, seeing all this stuff.
So he gets a phone call. Annie is back at home. The farm is about to be foreclosed, and Mark is there. Then she calls Kevin. Ray calls her, and she's like, "Oh, everything's fine." When we know it's not fine, because Mark is there, and they're about to foreclose on the house. They bought the note. On the house. So then they have only so many days to left to before the house is foreclosed on. So
I'll take just this little section here to talk a little bit about Frank Capra and how this movie I think was very intentionally inspired by the works of Frank Capra, where there was these small town ordinary people and magical sort of things would happen, or larger than life things would happen. And the idea of banks and foreclosures and all that stuff are central to many of his films, and people just trying to pay their rent or have a mortgage or whatever it was, and something fantastical would be happening. And it's just this movie is so in that spirit, and I think does it so beautifully. So the way that it's resolved at the end of the film obviously is such a Capra kind of bent to it. So
we won't even get into that just yet.
We'll get there.
So when he finally gets to Minnesota, they're in the town, and there's a man walking. Ray introduces himself, and he says, "Are you Moonlight Graham?" And he says to him, he says, "No one has called me Moonlight Graham in 50 years." He says his girlfriend, he couldn't sleep, so he went for a walk. Ray asked him if he could walk with him. That's how they end up meeting. He told his girlfriend he couldn't sleep, so he went for a walk, and that's when Ray ended up meeting him, and they went for a walk after that. So Ray runs into Moonlight Graham in the middle of the night walking down the street.
Yeah.
And he says to him, he says, "My wish was to play ball again and get a hit." And Ray, of course, invites him to Iowa.
And the speech that Burt Lancaster gives about why he can't go is so powerful and wonderful, and just what a legend Lancaster is, and just the way. And this was one of his very last films, so it's really great stuff to see.
The speech was part of it was, "I was born here, I live here, I'll die here."
Yeah.
But then Ray says, "Well, what about your wish?" And Terrence tells Ray to call his wife. She said Mark bought the house on the farm. So that's going back to that whole thing about them trying to foreclose on the house. So Ray, even though Moonlight said he wanted to get that hit, he still said, "I ain't going anywhere. I'm staying here. I live here. I'll die here." Mark said they had to sell the farm to him. That was his way of getting out of it. But instead of selling it to the guys that were foreclosing on the house, he bought the note so that would give him some more time.
Yeah.
And then Ray picks up the hitchhiker on the side of the road. He says his name is Archie Graham. Well, that sounds a little familiar. Archie Graham. Is that anything to do with Archie Moonlight Graham? Yeah, it is. It's the younger version of him. Somehow, maybe you can explain this to me, Jeremy. Mm-hmm. There's some kind of a time warp going on here with this Archie Moonlight Graham and Archie Graham.
The way that I always interpreted it was that Moonlight Graham had just died, and he basically, the way that the dead baseball players came back at the age that they were, that's why Moonlight Graham at that moment comes back at the age, basically at the same time period of those baseball players that came back to the baseball field, because he had passed away. He was able to come back in that moment. He's like connected to those other players, the ones that came back with Shoeless Joe. That's the way that I always kind of interpret it. Although they don't really spell it all out.
No.
You kind of have to kind of figure it out for yourself a little bit, which I like. Sometimes movies don't have to spoon feed you everything. There can be a little bit of mystery with stuff. But that's always the way I kind of took it, was that, I'm not going to go, I'm going to stay home, and then he dies, and then this happens immediately after.
Yeah. All right. And then, so Ray tells the story about having a catch with his old man before he died. This is the first time he heard about what the problem was with Ray and his father. We did not really know.
Yeah, we knew they had a falling out when he went to college from the opening narration, but hadn't really gotten any details up to this point.
So he always wanted to have a catch with his old man. And this is I wrote this in my notes, but I'm a little confused by this. He told his father he couldn't. This is what it was. He told his father he couldn't respect a man who's here is a criminal. Okay, so what he's talking about is Joe Jackson.
Yeah.
He told his father as a young kid, now not as an adult, that he couldn't respect Joe Jackson because he was a criminal. And of course, we know that Joe really didn't do anything, but he, like you said, because he was on the team and the team cheated, he was embroiled with them in the cheating scandal.
And it's one of those things, this is where it really starts to get into the emotional core of the movie with fathers and sons, is when you're a kid, at least for me, my relationship with my dad, and I think a lot of guys, you say dumb things because, you're a kid and, you're mad at your dad and you want to hurt them or whatever, or you're having an argument and you say this thing, and then that thing resonates in your mind for years and years. Why did I say that? I didn't mean that. And I think this has been rolling around in Ray's head the whole time So, that when Shoeless Joe does show up and all this stuff is happening, that's kind of the hidden reason behind it, is there's this emotional reason for all of it. And now obviously we're going to get to the reveal of what's, what really the voice is and everything. And that's all going to tie in, so perfectly.
Yeah. You explained it perfectly. Very good job explaining it, Jeremy. I couldn't have explained it any better. All right. So Ray and Terrence arrive back in Iowa with Archie. Ray introduces Terrence to Joe. You were a little bit ahead on this, but this is the story about told Ty Cobb to stick it. I have that in my notes.
Okay. I thought it was the first time they came. My bad. I thought it was the first time the team came.
That's all right. It's not a problem. Joe asked Archie to play ball with him and other players. So this is where Archie finally gets to play ball. Yeah. That dream that he had about getting a hit, he gets to go play ball with the players that came out of the corn.
But then it is cut short.
And then the pitcher Knuckles throws at Archie, knocks him down twice.
Mm-hmm.
Archie gets back up, gets some advice from Joe. He gets some advice from Joe. Look low and away. He's like, look low and away. And then Archie drives in a run with a sac fly. Yeah. So Archie, in his mind, that was cool because he got something accomplished. He got a sac fly. You got to run in because of a sac fly. So that's good in his mind. Mark interrupts the game, walks in front of the batter while hitting. Now, this is funny because Mark's walking right in front of home plate while there's a guy, one of the players coming out of the corn. And the guy gets all upset because he's swinging a miss and he struck out. Mark doesn't know because he doesn't see anything. But the guy gets all upset. They have to hold him back because he wants to go kill Mark.
Yeah, they can't leave the field. That's kind of the magic. If he actually left the field to go after Mark, something bad would happen. So they're like, no.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I just got to say a little filmmaking thing. Like, obviously those actors are really there, and Timothy Busfield's standing there. So he's got to do this acting where he doesn't see all of the people behind him. He's got to pretend that they're not there, and that's just. And you totally buy it when you're watching the movie. Like, you buy into the fact that he doesn't see them, but it's just acting. I love those little artificial things in movies where they sell you on stuff like that. Yeah. Just through the way stuff is staged in the performance.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Then we have an argument between Mark and Ray about selling the farm. And Karen tells Ray that people will come to watch the field, to watch the games. That's the little girl. She's a little girl. And she's telling her father, people will come to watch the games.
And that sets off Terrence, correct?
And then we got Terrence. Terrence convinces Ray not to sell the land. The one constant throughout all the years is baseball. This field is what is good. Ray chooses not to sell. Now, that is a speech that Terrence Mann gives that I kind of condensed in like one sentence. But it's a very powerful message that he gives about baseball, and it's about the field and whatnot. Terrence Mann. So Karen falls. Archie. Oh, okay. This is what happened. Karen falls, and then Archie leaves the field, comes to help her, and once he gets off the field, he turns into Doc Graham again, Moonlight Graham again, and it turns out
basically gives up that whole dream that he's living of being the young guy with the baseball players to go be a doctor who he was in his life. Like, it walks and becomes that, but that really was his dream. Like, helping children and being a doctor was his true dream, even though he loved baseball. And it's a wonderful little flip there that they do. And Burt Lancaster. Yeah, too bad he wasn't really a doctor, because wouldn't you love to have him as like your child doctor? The way that he plays that scene is wonderful.
Yeah, it turns out when she fell, she didn't really get hurt. She just had something lodged in her throat.
Yeah, she was choking on the hot dog or whatever it was. Yeah.
So then we get and then he says to the doc, "Thank you," and he says, "No, thank you," because he basically fulfilled his dream. playing ball with those guys.
Yeah.
And then everybody says goodbye to Doc Graham. Doc Graham walks off into the corn.
He had passed away for sure.
And then Joe says, "Hey, rookie, you were good." That was which is a cool line. Joe's, "Hey,
it's
rookie,
wonderful,
you were
yeah.
good."
Yeah, Ray Liotta really is special in that movie.
Yeah. And this is finally.
He's not in the movie a lot, but those few moments that he has, they're so great.
Yeah, and this is where Mark finally sees. He finally believes and he sees and he says,
I
"You're
love
not
his
selling the
reaction.
farm."
Who are all those people on the field? That's
Yeah.
great. Timothy Busfield does that perfectly.
That's when he believed. Once he believes, he sees the people on the field and he tells them, "No, you're not going to sell the field."
Yeah.
And then Joe asks Terrence to come into the corn, and Ray gets mad, says, "What's in it for him?" I mean, this, you don't really see Ray get mad in this movie, but he doesn't know what all this was about. He's mad.
Yeah.
He's like, why did I do all this? What
about me?
What about me?
Why is he special? I'm the one that did all this.
Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't get it yet. I think we all have those crises of faith when we're on our journey, trying to get somewhere. And it's like you always have that moment where it's like, wait a second, I got left out.
Yeah. So Terrence goes so we can see what's out there. He can write about it later, but we know, if you watch the movie, you know that he's not going to write about it later. My whole light went out. I'm down to like half a light now.
You're right. You look mysterious and cool now.
All right.
You've got half lighting.
Damn it. All right.
You're fine.
Now I got to look at my notes. So, okay. Terrence goes out. Okay. So Joe says, if you build it, he will come. Ray figures it out that it refers to his father.
And does he not realize who the voice was? I know at some point he does.
Yeah, he didn't realize who the voice was. And Joe has to tell him, if you build it, he will come. And that's when he finally figures it out that it was his father. He says it was you, but Joe says, no, Ray, it was you.
Yeah, the voice was Ray.
Yeah.
That's what this whole thing was. Ray was the voice. This was all what was in Ray's heart and had to come out. This had to happen for him to finally make peace with everything that had happened before with his father and with things that weren't fulfilled. And that's what this whole thing ultimately is about. And it was all Ray that did it.
That's right.
Which I think is wonderful. And it's kind of a nice thing, because if you, at the beginning of the movie, if you thought, well, the voice is Ray, then you would think it was just a movie about a crazy guy. But they get you there at the end where the fact that the voice was him makes sense in an emotional way and isn't just a story about a crazy dude. It's actually like a very satisfying thing, ultimately.
So Ray's father comes out of the corn. John Kinsella introduces himself to Ray and Annie and Karen. John says, the field is like a dream come true. He asks if it is heaven, and Ray says, no, it's Iowa.
Calling back to Joe perfectly.
I mean, you can't get better than that.
I have a question to ask you that I've always wondered, Dan. How much does his father know? Because the way that he plays it when he first comes out is, I'm just a young ball player, and this is a cool field, and I want to be here. But does he really know what's going on? Because he says it later at the end of the scene. You'll get to what he says to him, and he doesn't seem surprised. So I think he knows. But what do you think? You think that he doesn't?
No, I think he doesn't know, because this is young John Kinsella. This is not old John Kinsella. This is the innocent John Kinsella that he still believed in things and had a life about him before he became old John Kinsella, and things were different before
he is. I mean, he is the young version. His father is a young man, but I feel like somehow, on some level, he understands what's going on. I think somehow, in some spiritual, psychological way he understands who he is and why he's there. At least that's what I take away at the end of the scene. But yeah, it's one of those things that, again, it's kind of wonderful. The movie doesn't spell it out at all, so you can kind of decide for yourself: does he not know anything? Is he just the young version of his father with no understanding of anything, or does he actually know? And you can kind of read it any way that you want, and any way that you read it, the scene will kind of play differently for you.
Yeah,
It's all kind of
I feel like at the beginning of it, he doesn't know what's going on, but by the end of it, he figures out what's going on. And we haven't got to that yet, but we're going to get to that here pretty soon. So he tells him, no, it's Iowa. It's a place where dreams come true. That's what John says. It's a place where dreams come true.
Yeah.
They say goodnight to one another, but then Ray says, Dad, do you want to have a catch? And of course, this is one of the most memorable scenes in movie history. I mean, you talk to any baseball fan, any baseball player, anybody that's played the game of baseball, movie fans like
movie fan, yeah.
They always get emotional by, hey, Dad, do you want to have a catch?
Yeah, and when people talk about movies that are tearjerkers, they talk a lot about like maybe female-centric movies and a lot of those types of films, but there are certain key movies that are kind of geared a little more toward the male audience that are tearjerkers, and I think this is one of the, obviously, and I'd say one of the top three of those, where any like real guy can watch this movie, and this movie will move you in a way that few movies can. I think Shawshank Redemption is another movie like that, and there are a few, but very few movies can do what this movie does, and it definitely ties into baseball and sports in general, and that moment of just them throwing the ball back and forth, it perfectly captures that. But it's fathers and sons, and I don't think there's any guy who can't relate to that. And it's just, I mean, I'm tearing up right now just thinking about it. It will always be powerful, and this, I think, for many reasons, but most of all, maybe this moment. This is a timeless movie, and this is a movie that people are always going to discover and be touched by, because it just really taps into something that few films do, and you don't have to be the tough macho guy, and I don't like to cry at movies and stuff. Like, you will allow yourself to cry at this movie. This movie earns it for pretty much any man who watches it.
No, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I was emotional rewatching it, when I was doing my notes and stuff, and I just want to get to the last. John says, "Yeah, I'd like that," and then you see the camera panning up, and the cars are coming from all over the field to see the Field of Dreams.
Yeah, huge line of cars. I'm not entirely sure how the word got out that fast, but you go with it. And it's a movie, and it's a very Capra sort of button there at the end. But yeah, and then I think we're going to get into it, but there's that's a really resonant ending, because that actually ended up happening in real life. But I think we'll get there.
Well, what I always like to ask, when I do these type of things, I chose to do a series of 6 sports films. So I'm a big sports fan, and because I know how they resonate with people if you're a sports fan, but they also have great messages in them too. My friends about 2 years ago went to Iowa, and they went and visited the Field of Dreams
because they kept the field from the movie.
Yep.
And they kept it basically open. And I've watched videos on YouTube of fathers and sons filming themselves going there and playing catch together. And that's something that's just been a thing that has been going on, since the movie, for going on 30 years now. So, yeah.
So when Karen says that, don't worry, Dad, they're going to come to see the field. They're going to come play ball on the field. Well, they did it in the movie at the end of the movie, but they've done it now in real life for 25 years. This film came out. This is the 25th anniversary of Field of Dreams.
It's 30, isn't it?
Is it 30? Maybe it is 30. Yeah,
it's
you could
30
be right.
Years,
it's 30.
Since the movie. 89.
Yeah. Oh, wait. That's right. 30. What am I?
Yeah.
My math.
That's all right. Yeah, and I wasn't sure exactly when they opened it to the public. I think it was pretty soon after the movie. But
so it's just so crazy that what is said in the movie comes true in real life.
Which makes you think, I never really thought about this, but are those long line of cars at the end of the movie, is that fathers and sons coming to play baseball together? Because that's what happened in real life. I mean,
Apparently.
it's not like everybody that went there went for that reason, but from what I've seen, that's a lot of people are, it's a tradition. Father and a son goes there and does that,
Well,
enact that scene, basically.
like you said, I watch documentaries on, and there's grandmothers running around the bases,
Yeah.
and his mothers
Yeah,
and
yeah.
his sisters, and everybody and their brother is
Yeah.
running around the bases. And the people that own the land, they were like, well, how could we close this? How could we cut this off to everybody? This should be shared with the
Yeah.
world.
It was a low budget movie, so it wasn't like they built a big set in Hollywood. No, they went to a farm in Iowa and they made the baseball field there at somebody's farm, and that's what you do with indie filmmaking. And yeah, the people that owned it kept it going, and it became this whole thing. Quick little side note, I think it was a couple years ago, there was actually a fire and some of it burned down. I don't know if you heard about this.
No, I didn't.
And they used crowdsourcing to get it fixed and get it, because people cared so much, they got it repaired and everything. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, that was a whole thing a couple of years ago. So yeah, it's just something that lives on in people's hearts, and people stepped up when something tragic like that happened.
So when I do these videos, I always like to ask, what is, you already talked a little bit about it, but I always like to say, what is it about this film in particular that resonates as a sports film, as a great film 30 years later, where they're putting out special editions and people are talking about, like you said, they go to the field, they go there, they have a catch with their father, and all these. Why does this film resonate with people so much?
Well, personally, like I kind of got into a little bit at the beginning. Like I'm not so much a sports fan, and when I look back at my life and like the big defining moments for me, I think of like going to movies and making student films and going to theme parks and stuff like that. But the few moments in my life that were about sports and about the world of sports, pretty much all were connected to my father. One of my key memories of childhood was watching. Just a little personal detail. I live in Southern California, so the teams for me growing up were the Anaheim Angels for baseball, and then the Los Angeles Lakers, and then the basically once they were a thing, the Ducks and Anaheim here. So those were my teams growing up. Those are the teams my dad loved. So one of my memories as a kid is actually watching on TV the 1988 NBA championship with the Lakers. The key Lakers team from the 80s, the Dream Team with the Magic Johnson and all those guys. And I got to watch that game with my dad and cheer when they won that championship. And it was something that I still remember like it was yesterday. And then going to Angels games with him in in my teen years. And going to see the Ducks, and then ultimately when the Angels won the World Championship in 2002, seeing my dad, like that's something he wanted his whole life. He'd been an Angels fan since he was a kid. Something I know you relate to, being a Red Sox fan your whole life, and them finally winning the series. I mean, and I experienced all this stuff, through my dad, and that's really what sports is to me. Since it wasn't really my interest, it was my dad's interest. That's what sports is. It's my relationship with my dad, and I understand through him what a wonderful game baseball is and how magical it is because I see it in him, and that's what's reflected in this movie. Through the relationship with him and his family and him and his dad and the guys that come to that field and how human it all is, that really shows what baseball really is. It's a way for guys to connect with each other and for families to connect, and that's what, it is for me. And yeah, I appreciate the game. I've watched the Ken Burns documentary on baseball. I appreciate other sports like basketball and hockey. I understand what these mean to people and the industry that's involved and what an important, cornerstone it is in American culture, all of this stuff. But for me, it's always going to be linked to that relationship and to family and to my dad. And, it's something that when I get to the end of my life, I'm always going to be thankful that I had that. And I'm always going to be thankful, that we connected on that and that, because, how dads are. Dads can be, they don't always talk about emotional things and open up. But when it comes to baseball, like my dad will talk your ears off for hours and open himself up and be interested and engaged. And I got to have those experiences with my dad because he loved baseball and other sports. And, and this movie it gets to the heart of that. And that's why, to me, it is like the most emotional, most touching and important sports movie for me.
Wow. I'll tell you what, man, you really said a lot there that I was just like, wow, this really, I picked the right guy to talk about Field of Dreams with, that's for sure.
I'd have a lot to say about Rocky too, but for Rocky as well, and Rocky too. I love Rocky too. But no, yeah, Field of Dreams. I could talk about this movie anytime for sure.
Yeah, and just touching on a little bit what you said, I did not get along with my father very well.
Yeah.
And my father is alive today, and I know your father is not, or is?
He is, yes.
He is, okay.
My dad is alive. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
My father is alive, and we do not get along. But one of the few times we do get along, we do talk, is about my sports teams. He'll call me about the Red Sox or the Patriots or the Bruins or Notre Dame. Those are our teams. And I can interact with him about sports and stuff like that. But we did not get along. Hey, Dad, you want to have a catch? It never resonated with me.
It just connects people. There's something magic about baseball and about sports in general that it just connects people, and it's undeniable.
Well, yeah. I mean, and when the Red Sox won the World Series in 2004, and then we've won 3 World Series since. We won 4 in 15 years. Things like Boston Strong in 2013 when we had the Boston Marathon bombings, and Cowboy Up was a thing in 2004. And we had these slogans and things that, when you're a fan of something, it just gets everybody involved, and you become part of. And you mentioned Showtime. You were part of. Were just right involved with Showtime, the Showtime Lakers, and of course I was a fan of the Celtics during that era. So your teams, your team and my team, we played. So it's very great to hear that even though you're not the biggest sports fan, you can see how important sports are for our culture, and the whole, hey, Dad, do you want to have a catch? And he says, sure, why not? Resonates. You could put it in any Venezuela, Japan, Cuba, and they can relate to, hey, Dad, do you want to have a catch? New York, Massachusetts, California, Illinois, wherever, Iowa. And that's why it's such a powerful moment in film, in pop culture. And if you poll any baseball player, any coach, any little league coach, and they will all, I'd be willing to put money on it, they'd all mention Field of Dreams. Hey, Dad, do you want to have a catch?
Oh, yeah.
And you got anything else to say?
No, I just, it's just dawning on me. It's 30 years. I can't believe it.
Yeah, 30 years.
Yesterday, seeing this movie for the first time, and it still means as much to me 30 years later. And like I said, it's going to live on. This is a movie that will always live on.
Well, that's the thing about this series. I wanted to do a sports movie thing, talk about movies, but also talk about sports. And I wanted to do, I figured, well, 6 is the magic number. I can get 6 people to talk about 6 different movies. And we'll talk about 6 iconic movies. And when I thought about it, I was like, I got to get Jeremy. I can get Jeremy to do 1. I think I can get him to do Field of Dreams. And I know he's going to really contribute a lot. And you really did, Jeremy. I really appreciate it.
Man, my pleasure. I was so glad to be here. And, heck, maybe I'll go see a baseball game next week. Who knows?
I'd love to go see a baseball game. My local team is about 2.5 hours of drive away from me. And I work the weekends. So, in the middle of the week, I'm kind of busy with other things. But
I live about 10 minutes from the stadium. So
oh, God. If I come visit you, that's what we're doing. If I ever come to California and visit you, we're going to a ball game.
The baseball stadium and the hockey stadium are practically right next to each other. I'll have to go to both.
We'll have to see if we can time it where the Red Sox are playing the Angels.
Okay. So it'd be one of those nights.
No. I'll be honest with you. I go to sporting events for the fun of it. If my team wins, it's a bonus. You know, I don't. I'm not one of these nasty people that sit in the stands and like want to give heckling and all. No, I'm not that way. Unless you're a Yankee fan. I don't like the Yankees.
Oh yeah.
I don't like I'm not a big Laker fan, but they're great. There's no denying the Yankees are great. The Lakers are great. I can't deny these teams are great. You know, so that's the one thing I can take away from the Yankees and Lakers, even though I'm not the biggest fan of them. They are both great franchises with a lot of great players and a lot of great history. But I think
I don't think I could get my dad to say anything good about the Dallas Cowboys, but
oh yeah, I have friends that are Cowboys fans, so I can't get into that with them because you know.
Hey,
but
that's part of being a fan. You have your rivalries.
Yeah, oh yeah. And if you can be good about it, if you can be polite about it, if you could be friendly about it, even though you're giving each other a hard time or whatever, that's what it means. If you're being rude and obnoxious and nasty, there's no place in sports for that. You know, there's no place in sports for that. But where can you be found, Jeremy? Once again, thank you very much for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad to be here. You can find me at Jeremy and Paul Adams on Facebook and YouTube. I have some videos on YouTube and some personal content on Facebook. And then I'm also involved with a movie trivia league called Full Metal Trivia and Full Metal Media. We're on Facebook and YouTube as well. If you love trivia and involved with movies, and we even do some other stuff, TV and movie debating and stuff, you can check it all there. And then if you happen to be a YouTube and movie lover, there's the Movie Trivia Schmodown, which is a big, huge YouTube channel, and I have some very small involvement within helping those guys out, and it's something that I'm involved in. So be sure to check out all that awesome content.
And obviously, you can find me at Dan Scapal on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Or I am a writer. I write film reviews for a website called cinesportstalk.com. Go figure, right? CINESPORTSTALK.com, where I write about sports and movies, mostly movies lately. I've been writing a lot about sports recently. And this is a series. This is episode number 2. So hopefully, if you're watching this and you like what we talked about, come back and watch the next 4 episodes, or go back and watch the previous episode where I hosted with Chance Ellison. We talked about Remember the Titans. So for Jeremy and myself, good evening.